Hello everyone! Another week has passed, which means we've had another episode of Power Rangers Beast Morphers. Is this episode as good as the last one? Does it continue to be a good adaptation of Tokumei Sentai Gobusters? It's time for a transformation sequence. Our second episode of Beast Morphers is Evox's Revenge. Joining our alumni of former Ninja Steel employees is the director, Simon Bennett, who, in addition to directing the first episode, Beasts Unleashed, also directed 11 episodes of Ninja Steel, including the 25th anniversary special, Dimensions in Danger. We get introduced to a few new things in this episode, specifically the Beast Bots, the Beast Morpher versions of the Buddyroids from Gobusters. They don't really do too much in this episode, so I'll cover the differences between the American and Japanese versions of these characters in a future episode. The main thing is that with the introduction of the Beast Bots, we can have a Zord fight this episode. The central conflict is between Ravi and Zoe. They both want to be the leader and feel that they have the qualifications and are entitled to it. This causes them to argue with each other, which allows the villains to get some Morphex. Devon is the voice of reason that is trying to get them to cooperate and stop fighting with each other. This is a big departure from how Devon was portrayed in the previous episode, Beasts Unleashed. I kind of figured that it would be Devon and Ravi going at it to see who should be leader, with Devon winning out because he had a lot of natural talent and is decisive and adaptable. It's an odd choice, but I think you can justify it by saying that the reason Devon had such an attitude in the previous episode was that he hadn't found his calling, which meant he was directionless and frustrated. However, as a Power Ranger, Devon has found his calling and is generally more happy and calm. There is still probably going to be conflict with his dad in future episodes. Just like Beast Unleashed, this episode uses a lot of original footage with few exceptions. There is some Japanese footage used for the Zord battle, and there is a little footage of Ryuji fighting the Tyroid. While the characters are fighting, they end up succumbing to their weaknesses, which allows the villains to escape. I didn't mention the weak points last week because I wasn't sure if Beast Morphers was going to use them, but they did, with some interesting choices. The Beast Morpher Rangers have all the same powers as their Go-Buster counterparts. Red has super speed, blue is super strong, and yellow can jump really well. In addition to a power, each member of the team had a weakness related somehow to computers. If Yoko wasn't constantly eating, her battery would run out and she would fall down helpless. If Ryuji used too much of his strength, he would overheat and become a villainous delinquent. Zoe and Ravi have pretty much the same weaknesses. Ravi overheats and attacks Zoe, and Zoe eventually loses energy and falls down. Both Hiromu and Devon freeze when they see a certain object, but their reasons for it are very different. Hiromu has a phobia of chickens, because of a traumatizing event that happened to him at a young age, and so even seeing a picture of a chicken causes him to freak out and freeze. Devon freezes when he sees a dog because he has cheetah DNA, and since cheetahs are cats, they're afraid of dogs. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of this change. Hiromu's phobia of chickens was endearing because he's such a serious character that his fear of chickens is just charming and absurd. Devon freezing up because he sees a dog is just weird. So whereas in Go-Busters the weaknesses were based on computers because our heroes have a vaccine program in them to destroy the big bad, Beast Morphers decided to do the DNA splicing as the explanation for them. When Evox corrupted the Morphex to create the evil avatars, he also corrupted the gene splicing process, resulting in the weaknesses. When Zoe runs out of energy, she has to eat carrots to replenish it because Jackrabbit. In Go-Busters, Yoko was constantly eating chocolate. I'm okay with the change to carrots, and I can see the writers being concerned with encouraging children to have good eating habits. So, good for them. When Ravi uses all his muscles and strength, he goes in a rage like a gorilla in the wild. Yeah, okay, and I can buy that. So Zoe and Ravi's weaknesses were decently adapted from Go-Busters, and Devon's is just lazy. The monster the Rangers fight in this episode is the Tyroid from the 5th episode of Go-Busters. That episode also included a central conflict between the Blue and Yellow Rangers, but it was much more personal. In Evox's Revenge, Yellow and Blue are fighting over who should be leader. None of the characters know about the weaknesses, and they continue to compete with each other despite these weaknesses slowing them down. In Go-Busters, the characters grew up with their powers, and they are familiar with their weaknesses. While Hiromu lived with his sister, Yoko was basically raised by Ryuji as an older brother. Ryuji did everything he could to prevent Yoko from seeing his darker half when he overheated. When Ryuji overheats, Yoko tries to calm him down, thinking he would never hurt her, only to have her world come crashing down when Ryuji threatens her. Ryuji has to accept that, as missions get tougher, he's probably going to overheat and that he can't shelter Yoko forever. And Yoko has to accept that her idealistic older brother isn't always perfect. While the conflict between Yoko and Ryuji is much more personal and engaging than the competition between Ravi and Zoe, it's easy to see why the writers made this change. Ravi and Zoe don't have the same history that Ryuji and Yoko have, and so it just wouldn't work with them. Having them in competition over who should lead gets them to know each other better, but also to examine their own place in the team, and so while I prefer the Go-Busters dynamic, the Beast Morpher storyline was perfectly fine for this episode. Unfortunately, the villains continue to be the weakest part of this series so far. We still don't have any backstory for Evox. On top of that, we have a new villain named Scrozzle who lives in the cyber dimension that the villains got teleported to at the end of the last episode. He's the one who created the foot soldiers that the villains use. He made them to defend himself from a robot named Vargoyle. I'm guessing that Vargoyle is going to end up being Messiah Reboot, but we'll see. In Go-Busters, by episode 2, we learn Messiah's backstory as well as get to see him have a fun, interesting dynamic with Enter. Messiah is the childish god who doesn't care about long-term success and just wants immediate gratification. And Enter has to indulge him while somehow still moving the Glass's long-term goals forward. He even recommends sending multiple giant robots to overwhelm the Go-Busters, but is shut down because Messiah is impatient. I don't dislike Evox, Roxy, and Blaze, but instead of adding in new characters, I kind of wish they did more work with the ones they already have. I do like the design for Scrozzle, though, and he's an original design and villain for the show that doesn't have a Go-Busters counterpart, so that's neat. He basically just does everything that Enter did in Go-Busters. So, what did I think of this episode overall? Despite some minor gripes, I thought this episode was a good continuation. It had some great character moments, such as Ben and Betty saving Devin while he's frozen with their enthusiastic incompetence, and the interactions with our main cast were lovely in general. The action sequences were mostly original footage again and looked great. I actually had to watch the Go-Buster episode to figure out which parts were Japanese footage. It's an episode that delivers on everything you'd expect from Power Rangers and has kept me interested and curious to see what happens next. That's all for now. Till next time, as always, may the power protect you.